Okay, so I will briefly walk you through the final project. They were all published before, but I think now you're getting ready, and kind of the timing, my placement of the projects according to the timeline of the course was pretty much designed in a way that I feel that you have all the tools to start thinking about this. The final project, and you have now basically 2 weeks to present this, is based on kind of a toy game or some kind of a game proposal, if you want, that you developed from your previous composition assignments. You don't need to have like a full game, right? I mean, basically what we want to do is have some kind of a sketch just from these three scenes. So what you do is, you think now about the materials that you collected so far. You had some kind of an opening scene. You have a boss, and you have your antagonist and protagonist, your hero and the boss. And you have maybe some kind of a music for more of a battle or more of a stressful situation. And then you might also think about some kind of a final scene that can reuse the music of the opening scene. So with these 3 or 4 scenes, let's say you have 4 scenes now, you can think about different trajectories. You can start with the opening, then you can go to the first scene, introduce maybe the character, and then maybe it goes back to the city, then you introduce again something that happens with the boss, you get into the battle scenes, you get into some kind of a danger zone, maybe you go to the danger zone and then you move to the battle scene, and then you move out of this whole set of possible scenes into the final exit. So you can think about all this branching or the transitions that can happen. So if you think about like 4x4, like a table, right? You start from 1, you can go to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 4. You can go from 2 to 3, 3 to 2. I don't know if you can come back to 1 or not. It really depends how you design your scene. Maybe you can jump immediately to the ending. So now you basically can say, well, we have these 3 compositions. We can put them in different order. So that's kind of the first step. But you might also want to be able to basically just generate more from what you already have. And this is, basically the main task in the final project is to use or create this as an adaptive music form. So what it means to be adaptive means that, first of all, you think about the branching. So the branching might require you to put in some transitions, in some way of going through some kind of a mixing or transition scene that will actually allow you to go from 2 to 3 or from 2 to 4 or go from 3 to 2. So you might think about creating some sorts of little clips, either by thinking about fading out or putting some kind of a musical element that kind of just allows us to transition from one to another one. So this was something that we'll explore in the classes, to come as you work on the game. We'll kind of talk more about these adaptive compositional techniques. So the tasks or the challenges for the final projects are pretty much as following. First of all, you can take the music that you already have and break it up into some constituent elements so they can be manipulated separately. Now, we don't have too many compositions that have many layers. Maybe the second one, right, where I asked you kind of to cut them into several layers, but also in the first one. In the first one, most of you did use more than one track. Okay, so when we had arpeggios on chords, you separated them into maybe a bass line and the arpeggios and maybe melody. So if you have these three tracks, actually each one of them is a musical material of its own function. So you can use it separately. So if you want to build up some tension, you can start playing just by playing the bass, and then maybe if you had a rhythmic section, you can introduce it later. So actually, that one assignment one, you probably can break it up into at least 4 or 5 or maybe even more combinations of these different elements that will match different situations in the game. So you break up your music in the previous assignments into some constituent elements that could be played or manipulated separately. And so I'm kind of reading from one. Now, if you want to even generate more material, now we know how we change the instruments. So you can go back to assignment one and play render the same music not with Beat Invader, but with some other musical instrument. You can take the same compositions you used and also change the tempo. So even in the second assignment, where you might have broken this into 2 or 3 layers, but they're all played in one tempo, now you can start like either using them separately or together, but you can play them very slow, faster. You can start changing the pitch transposition. So anything that basically takes your existing material and basically kind of expands this to more combinations, more possible situations. Now, when you have this, like now from 3, you have maybe many more possibilities. You create a cue list of music corresponding to game situations or player actions. So this is something that you kind of imagine and you propose. And then you kind of link or assign cues to music. You then think about transitions between them. So this is maybe the most kind of new aspect that we haven't yet considered is now how do you glue or stitch them together? Once you have all of that, which is really the core idea of your final project, and of course, it requires you to design a game. So you have kind of to complete your ideas of the game that you started sketching into kind of a sort of a story or walkthrough to the game. Then from all possible renderings, you take one possible walkthrough and line up these sequences and record this into a soundtrack. So basically you create a soundtrack by lining up the music for each scene in the order of the gameplay with the exact duration of that scene. So what I mean by this, eventually you create a game, somebody else can play it in different order, it takes more time, less time. You follow a different sequence. You just take like a storyboard of your situation. So you say, well, this gameplay goes in this sequence. You stay on first game for several seconds, then second scene, then you go back to first one, and maybe there is a transition. You record a soundtrack that corresponds to that specific walkthrough, and give the account for the exact timing. So basically, we have eventually one long recording and a sequence of scenes with times, so I can kind of go and like read through this. You don't need to create. It's not a video. It's not a game. It's basically a document with the scenes, with timings, and the sound recording. So very much the same format you did the other assignments, just that now it's not one scene, it's a sequence of scenes and the recording. So that's kind of what you submit is basically a document with a storyboard, images, timeline, short text description, a link to soundtrack on one of the Clipit or SoundCloud with that corresponds to that walkthrough, and then also some of the writing that describes what exactly you did. Okay, so this is your task for the remaining 2 weeks. when we talk about in the future weeks about adaptive music techniques, mostly about transitions and stingers, um, uh, I didn't mention here specific stingers or sound elements. Stingers are like, sound effects. So, you jump for some kind of a golden coin, you get a bang or something, or shooting, or well, shooting maybe is less of a stinger, but you have some kind of sound events that correspond to game actions that are very kind of sound specific. We will not really talk about this. We didn't mention sound design to capture like sounds from the environment or diegetic sounds. If you in your scene there is a radio playing with a specific sound, we didn't include that. Um, you are free or encouraged to add any of this to your soundtrack to make the story more convincing, but this is not required. So basically, just to sum it up, it's kind of deconstructing your three assignments into a lot of elements, uh, modifying them, processing them using the tools that you have already, just to create more variety and more possibilities, combinatorial possibilities, having your storyline, connecting the dots, basically, which cue corresponds to which sound, and then thinking about transitions and creating a walkthrough. It might look as many steps, but I think they're pretty much now, it's like, you created now all the portions for your final basically dish, and now you have to put them together in some kind of nice plating and sequence them. So I think that's the fun part. You basically now put everything together into kind of a story of your own, and you have a chance kind of to imagine, a game that is your own creation. So I hope it kind of makes sense, and we'll be there kind of to talk more and give more examples about how the adaptive music is done. And there are tools actually that help you do these things automatically, these middleware. So we might mention them, but you're not required to use any of these other tools, although they're optional, as I mentioned, the alias and middleware software in the beginning of the class. But don't worry about kind of using that. Just with the tools that you have right now, there are plenty of techniques, and they're sufficient for making a final project. Okay, so I'll stop the recording and answer